So Cusco is very high. It's just under 10,000 feet above sea level. Most missionaries, no matter where they're from, spend about the first week or two climatizing, getting used to living at that height. So, I mean, the first week I had trouble breathing. I mean, even just walking down the street, you get tired. And Cusco is really bad because it's all hills. So, sure, there's flat parts, but most of the people, their houses, are in the hills. So if you have to go to an appointment, you go up the hill. And your first week or so there, it's rough. And I remember sleeping at night was hard. Just there would be like pain in your chest, and you'd have to like breathe really shallowly just because there's no air. You breathe quick and fast. Anyway, aside from that, there is a story that I like to tell from my first week. I was with my companion, my only gringo companion, in my whole mission, and we were just knocking doors in our area, and a man answered the door. We talked to him for a bit, and then he let us in. And in Peru and lots of South American countries, you go in through like a main door, and there's like a courtyard area, and then there's like 10 houses behind, or something like that. And so he brought us back into the courtyard area. We sat and taught him a lesson for a bit, and then he's like, hey, well, we can go to where I live. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. But we went in there and ended up being like this really small room, maybe like 5 feet by 10 feet. Basically, he had his bed and a few other things. And the thing that, of course, stood out was a wheelbarrow full of lamb's heads. And then we had our seats, and I think he was sitting on the bed or something, but you couldn't not just stare at this wheelbarrow full of lamb's head. And of course we were like, what is going on here? Anyway, so he explained that was his job. Like, he sold lamb's heads to people, and they'd buy them, and I did have lamb head soup later, not then, but later. So it's quite a delicacy here. So it's a good mission experience for your first week. So the Peru Cusco Mission, as far as I know, as it was 3 years ago, could possibly have changed by now, consisted of 4 districts, like a state, which are Cusco, Puno, Madre de Dios, and Abancay. So there's those 4 districts of Peru in the mission. I believe there were about 11 zones, maybe 12, and each of those had 6 to 7 districts. This mission is based in Cusco. When I was there were 2 stakes in Cusco. I think there's a third now. It's growing rapidly. And then Puno had 2 stakes, I think, in the main city. I think Madre de Dios just had the 1, and then Abancay just had the 1, I think. I spent most of my time in Cusco, so I know Cusco really well. The other areas I did go to, but not as much. The closest temple when I was there was the Cochabamba, Bolivia temple, or the Lima temple, depending on which side of the mission you were on. Now, they're building the Arequipa temple in Arequipa, which is only 5 hours from Cusco. Before it was a 24-hour bus drive to either temple, Lima or our Cochabamba. And they're building another temple in Lima, and they're just finishing one up north in Trujillo. But that's way far away. So the mission, like geography, I'd say 3/4 of it is mountainous. You spend, depending on where you are, you're well above 8,000 feet. That's where all the people live. And then we do have 2 areas that are jungle, and they're near sea level. So most of the time it's cold and dry, except in the rainy season, and then it rains every day. And they have a joke down there that if you're in the sun, you get burned, and if you're in the shade, you get burned, because it's so cold. And it's true. You can be outside in the middle of the day, melting in the sun or freezing in the shade. That's just the way it is. Religiously, the people are very Catholic. It was always interesting to see their like parades and idol worship. They would have like statues or kind of like floats, but carried by hand, of Virgin Mary. They have a big festival in Puno, La Virgen de la Candelaria. It's like a month-long craziness. There's a portion of it where the missionaries aren't even allowed to leave their homes because it's insane. But as for the members are very faithful. I had the opportunity to serve in, it wasn't a district, it was a family group about an hour outside of Cusco. So they were kind of like, a family group is a break off of a ward, basically. They don't have a branch president, they have a bishop, but the bishop is so far away that he really doesn't influence them at all. So at the time I was the district leader, and so I was in charge of this family group, with me and 3 other missionaries. And that's always a fun experience because you really get to know the members a lot, and spend most of your time with the members as you're, working to build up a family group, this small unit of the church, and delegate responsibilities and teach members. Most of these members were baptized in the last 5-10 years, and really don't know that much about the gospel. But I think it was the last week I was in Urcos, we found a family that was a member that hadn't been coming to church for a long time because they didn't think there was any church nearby. But the last week I was there, he was put in as the family group leader, freeing the missionaries from that responsibility, but with the understanding that we still need to help out a lot in that position. So by now, 3 years ago, that could be a branch, maybe even a ward. There's a ton of growth. Unfortunately, not a lot of retention. Lots of people are baptized, but then they don't stay in the church, or stay active. And it's getting better as we work more with the members, teaching with them and really focusing on making sure there's a pass off from the missionaries to the members. When I was there, a lot of our baptisms were young children or like teenagers, and most of the time they don't stay with the church for lots of reasons. The few converts that I baptized and that have stayed in the church were families, couples specifically. And the problem there is most people in Peru and South America aren't married. They live together, they have 3, 6 kids, but they've never legally been married. And I remember we were teaching a family, and there had been like 6 couples of missionaries before us that had been teaching the same family, but they weren't married. Normally, missionaries would drop them after a while if they weren't going to get married. But for some reason, they had kept this couple. So I, learned their story, and the problem was the sister had been born in this really, really small town, like I think it was 3 or 4 hours away, like up in the hills, like nowhere near civilization. And in order to get married, you had to have a birth certificate. So after a while, my companion and we got permission to go to this remote, I don't even know what it's called, place out in the middle of nowhere. We figured out we could take a bus here and to this place and then get on a different bus and go out there, and there's only one bus that comes back, so you'll have to spend the rest of the day there. But we went and got there, and luckily the guy gave us the birth certificate. We didn't even know if he would, because we weren't her. But he did. And then we came back. We spent the whole day. That's all we did that day. While we were there, we did some tracting, but probably didn't get much out of that. But then we came back, and that couple got married. We put the paperwork together, got everything we needed, and planned a wedding and married them and baptized them. And they are still my most faithful converts. That couple and their 3 or 4 kids or so. So it's worth it. It takes a lot of work. Sometimes it's not that extreme. But getting the couples to actually get married, even if they've been living together for a year or 30 years, that's a challenge to get them married legally, and then to get them baptized, and a goal set to go to the temple. I would definitely focus more on having a good relationship with my companions. They weren't always the best. I had a few really awesome ones, and I actually had a lot of companions. Not always my fault. Not usually my fault. And some of these companions were coming off of emergency transfers and had been doing not so good things, and were sometimes difficult to deal with. But all you can do is love them and listen to them and try and understand. If you don't communicate with your companion, there's no way the Spirit can be with you. So I would definitely focus more on that, and teaching wise I would definitely try and work more with families. Like I said, a lot of the youth that you baptize don't stay in the church. And I wish there was a way to fix that, but I don't know of any way. And the most success I had was with families. Baptizing a mom and a dad and whatever kids they may have. Or I even had one family that was just a mom and her kids, and I believe they're still faithful as well. So I served in the Peru Cusco Mission. I served in Cusco twice, in a little city, Urcos. I served in Andahuaylas. I served in Quillabamba, Juliaca, Puno. I think that's it. So Cusco was originally the capital of the Inca Empire. So it's very touristy, and there's lots and lots of ruins and places to see. Even like downtown Cusco is built from the Inca ruins, and it's all based off of that Incan tradition. And so roads are insane because they followed the original roads and they weren't meant to be driven on. So it's very easy to get lost and to not find the right road you were looking for because it's not connected. But apart from that, it's cool because there's like a main plaza, and there's a big valley, and that's, kind of where all the business is or the main traffic is. But then you go up the hills, and there's Sacsayhuaman, which is, they have a big festival every year, Inti Raymi, which is like the festival to the sun. So that happens in the ruins, and they have a bunch of other ruins all around the city, Ollantaytambo, and there's a ruin right in the middle of the city. What's it called? I forget what it's called. But it's a big, big cathedral built on top of the original Incan sun temples. So they have the temples on the inside, and it looks like a cathedral from the outside. I remember what it's translated. It's the Golden Fields, I think is what it's translated from Quechua, which is the Inca language. So there's a big field out in front of this. It's really pretty. So a lot of the people in Cusco work tourism, either doing tours or selling bags or whatever trinkets you might want to get there. And then there's also a lot of people work food industry or just making braids, necklaces, jewelry type stuff from their home and selling to the stores. It's very, very common in Peru all over to see like vendors, basically like carts, and it's just like grocery store items, candy bars, crackers, whatever, but that's their job, that's their living, is to sell drinks and whatever on the side of the road. I felt very safe in Cusco, because tourism is probably their main income. They protect the Americans pretty well. We did have a few stories here and there. It's not perfect, but nowhere is. So I never felt endangered in my mission ever. So it's fairly safe. Transportation, most of the time you ride the combi, which is they have like routes, but it's just a van or sometimes a small bus, and they can get really crowded on those small buses. You maybe have a 15 passenger van and you fit 30 people in there, and that's common. Like, it happens every day on every route, so just get used to it. It's very common for people to take their animals or the vegetables that they're selling. They'll carry them around in their mantas. They're like big blankets that they sling across their shoulders and just carry them. And it's very common for those to just be put right on the bus. Cusco's really cool. So I'll talk about Juliaca. Juliaca is, I think, about an hour away from Puno, which is the other major portion of the Cusco Mission. Puno and Juliaca are known for being more dirty, more uncivilized, more aggressive, prideful, and we didn't have any sister missionaries in those areas because it was dangerous, a little more dangerous. But Juliaca was my last area, and was actually one of my favorite areas. It's very flat compared with the rest of my mission. It was pretty flat, but it's still very high. There's a mountainous area, and at the top of it, I think it was just under 10,000 feet. So you're still gasping for air. Near Puno, Puno is a city built right on Lake Titicaca. And Lake Titicaca has the floating islands, which you may have heard of. The floating islands, we actually have, I think it's a district on the floating islands, and at sometimes during my mission we would have a pair of missionaries on the islands, and sometimes we wouldn't. It fluctuated. But I think they have a branch on the islands. They built their own building on the islands. So every island is like someone's home. Like, you build an island and then you build your home on your island, and then you can connect your island to someone else's island and have a chain of islands that are connected. And the branch president built an island and built a building so that the members could come, and then they just travel around on boats and live off of the lake through fishing and hunting, and that's how they make their living. And so it's from Totora, which is just like a reed, kind of like a bamboo almost, but it's like a weed, so it grows everywhere. And so they have Totora harvesters. You just cut it down, and then you can eat it when it's fresh, and then when it's dry, it floats. So they'll bundle it up in big bundles and connect it all together and make islands out of these reeds. And they just float around. Yep. They're just on the lake. You never know. I think most of the islands are connected to like each other. So they have big chains of them. So they mostly stay together, but they do move. Apart from rain, it's a lake, so I guess there could be problems, but as far as I know, it hasn't. They've been there for hundreds, maybe even longer than that, hundreds of years. So I'll talk about Andahuaylas. Andahuaylas was my first official area. So you travel, I think, 5 hours to Abancay from Cusco, and then Abancay you travel at least another hour to Andahuaylas. So it's very much. Then you go to Andahuaylas, and then from Andahuaylas you take another 15-20 minute drive to Talavera. Talavera was my area. So it's very much out in the middle of nowhere. Most of the people there are farmers, or they will make bricks. And then again, a lot of food or small hands projects, crafts and stuff. I loved Andahuaylas because it was very simple. The people are very humble and are just living there with the hopes and dreams to have a living and to be able to provide for their families. They weren't aspiring to, be the president of Peru or to make a big corporation and make lots of money. They just want to have their families and be happy. It's a very, again, very rural, so there's lots of, there's fields of corn, fields of potatoes. Most farmers will grow potatoes, corn, or alfalfa. Alfalfa is used to feed like the llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs, which is a delicacy. I think in Talavera, I think the only like actual house, there were very few, and we as missionaries lived in one of them, or part of one of them, in the main square. Talavera is about 15 minutes or so from Andahuaylas. Andahuaylas is the main area of the city. Andahuaylas is about the same though. A little more busy. A lot of the bigger enterprises were there. And then of course in, I think, almost every city, but especially in Andahuaylas, Talavera, they have a feria or a fair, and it happens every week. And everyone will, unfortunately it's held on Sunday. A lot of people in Talavera had a hard time with coming to church because they made their living at the fair. I never went because it was on Sunday, but a lot of people would take their livestock either to buy or to sell, grains, corn, potatoes, all of that would happen at the fair. So a lot of the farmers couldn't make it to church on Sundays, but other people could. So it's hard, just because of the culture of the cities there, that you really had to kind of work with the richer people, and because they could come to church on Sundays. Occasionally we could convince them, a farmer, to come on Sundays. Occasionally. So I had culinary arts classes before in high school, and that's kind of what I'm studying now. And from a culinary or gastronomical perspective, many have said that Peruvian food is the best in the world. And it's true. Slightly biased, but it's true. They just have a wide range of everything. I mean, within Peru itself, because of the geography, they have desert, they have jungle, they have the sea, and all of those cultures combine in Peru. So you get everything from seafood like ceviche or fried trout or whatever's in the water, to your local farm ingredients. You have over 1,000 varieties of potatoes. You have, I know of 7 or so varieties of corn. And all of these are prepared differently depending on the potato. Like, you can't fry that potato because that's not a potato for frying. And the people were very passionate about their food and knew a lot about it. Some of my favorite meals or experiences was with families, and they would, slaughter a lamb, and you were part of the experience, and you get to, help, and, you help prepare it, and you prepare the oven, and you're there seasoning it, and then you cook it, and then you eat. That was not common, but always really cool. These would happen like at weddings or big events. Food. Some of my favorites is lomo saltado. It's just beef with tomatoes and onions in kind of a soy sauce, a brown sauce, and then another common one that's very popular is ají de gallina, which is chicken, like shredded chicken over rice in a pepper peanut sauce. So it's a little spicy, but you also get a little tiny bit of peanut, and it's creamy. So it's very good. One that I had to get used to was cacao. So cacao is made with cow's intestines. And the first time I had it, I almost threw up. I think I was feeling a little sick that day. Plus this kind of chewy, weird flavored dish didn't go so well for me. But then later, as I tried it again and again, it was actually really good and became one of my favorites. They have a lot of good things. I mean, papa relleno, which is like potato. It's a potato that they boil and then mash up, and then they take like meat and vegetables and stuff it in the mashed potato, and then they deep fry it. It's okay. So you have like a little ball of potato with meat sauce inside. And then of course, Peru is very well known for cuy, which is guinea pig. They'll grow them to be this big. And those are very special occasions. Cuy, by far, cuy was the most expensive thing you could buy, meat-wise. Most food is very cheap. You can get entire meals for $1, or a little bit more than that. But a cuy was probably $4 or $5, just the cuy, which is considerable for them. A common drink is Chicha Morada, which is purple corn juice. So first you have purple corn, which is fairly uncommon in the United States. But then they dry it and then boil it in water and add some spices and sugar, and it's very good purple corn drink. Chicha Morada. And then most of the time for drinks, they'll take fresh fruit and puree it, mix it with water, maybe add some sugar, and that's what you drink. And then because it's not necessarily a clean country, you don't drink water from the tap. So either you purchase bottles, or most of the time you drink Inca Cola or Coca-Cola, or purified, boiled, and then chilled water. And so I had 4 years of Spanish in high school, but then I went to BYU and studied Arabic for a year. So when the MTC called me to ask me some questions to evaluate how well I knew Spanish, they would ask me questions in Spanish and I could understand them, but then I would respond in Arabic. And they didn't understand that. Anyway, but because of that, I learned Spanish really fast. It came back to me. I remembered all those years of Spanish. And so I was able to spend a little bit of my time learning Quechua and Aymara. Aymara was spoken in Puno and Huli, closer to Bolivia. Aymara is definitely spoken a lot more in Bolivia. But and I didn't really study a lot of that, and didn't really meet very many people that spoke Aymara that didn't also speak Spanish. But in the more rural areas, and definitely among the older people, you could definitely find Quechua speakers. Sometimes they could also speak Spanish, but sometimes they only knew Quechua. So I learned a little bit of Quechua just from a book, and a lot of the people do actually speak or know at least a little bit of Quechua, even if they're mostly Spanish speakers. So it was always fun to be walking down the street and see some older people, and because of, blonde hair, blue eyes, they would look at me, and I could always pick out the word nyawi, which is eyes. They would always look at me and say something, and I could always pick out nyawi, because everyone would pick out my eyes. Everyone has black hair and brown eyes, and I stuck out. People would stare at me all the time, but it was fun to look at them and respond something in Quechua and just see their face light up and be like, oh my goodness, this gringo understands. He knows what I'm talking about. I didn't really go much into that because I didn't really speak Quechua, but just getting a little connection with them was fun. The only Aymara I remember, I think, is Kamisaraki, which is how are you, I think. It's very common to be sick the very first week because of the climate. And it happens to everyone. But some people have it really bad and need to go to the hospital. But this experience happened near the end of my mission. It was the last week. Me and a group of other missionaries had a week that wasn't part of a transfer, that we just had kind of in limbo. So our mission president sent us to Madre de Dios, which I had never been to, but it's a jungle. And I went with a companion who had never been my companion, but I knew him because he was in my same group. And because he came down, so Madre de Dios is near sea level, and he had been in Cusco or Puno, which is 10,000 feet above sea level, and he got sick coming down, which was really rare. So, I mean, he needed to go to the hospital, and the good part of this, he definitely needed to rest, and the Olympics happened to be on at the same time. And so we were at a member's house, and he was just resting, and we got to watch the Olympics. And it's interesting to watch the Olympics in South America, because they cheer for any South American country, and you don't really get to watch the United States at all. It's just interesting to see that perspective. But he was okay. He recovered and rested up the last few days, and he was good. In Peru, I think it's just in Peru. It might be in other South American countries, but it's traditional on your birthday for people like your friend, like your best friend or your family members, to crush eggs on your head without you knowing, of course. But in Peru, I had a certain mamita, pensionista, who kind of took it to the extreme. And it's always planned because she's very well known for it. So it's not just eggs with her. It's eggs and mayonnaise and flour and ketchup and soap and I don't even remember what else. And of course it all goes on your head. You can opt out of it, but she's gonna get you anyways, so just go with it. And I did see, I mean, it's not just her. I saw other people, just random Peruvians, get egged on their birthday. It's pretty common, but lots of fun. And then I think I have a picture. I mean, I have pictures of the whole experience, but I also have a picture of, I went home and like cleaned up, took a shower, and I got out and I still had egg on the back of my leg. Just dried there. Rain, by far. It can rain very heavily. Our mission issued everyone ponchos because of it. It rains really hard. It's very common to be called, because you're a missionary, to give a sacrament meeting talk 3 minutes before you are giving it. But at the time I was not in that situation. I was the family group leader, and I was preparing a talk, and I was talking about Daniel, and that he was a shepherd. I think it was Daniel. And I said Abejas instead of Ovejas, which means bees instead of sheep. And anyway, the whole congregation laughed, and I was like, oh yeah. One simple vowel change and you have a whole different word. So working with the members, either as a missionary or in a ward, really brings success, no matter what you're doing. If it's missionary work, awesome, but if it's reading the Book of Mormon, or if it's going to the temple, really getting to know, I guess the life lesson is, as you really get to know someone, then you have success. We really want to focus on knowing people, and knowing not just their names, not just where they work, not just what they do, but knowing their struggles, knowing what they're dealing with emotionally. That's where I have found the most success. I packed very simply. I only took white shirts and black pants. That was enough for me. I mean, ties, of course. It's difficult to say because you're really in the extremes. It can be really hot in the jungle, or it can be really cold in the mountains. Most of the time I wore a short sleeve shirt and a sweater and a jacket because those layers can come off. And you can wake up in the morning and have it be 60s and then be over 100 during the day. It really varies. The mission was doing a better job of, providing like boots and ponchos for the areas that really need them. Apart from a warmer jacket, that was pretty much the only thing I bought, but I bought it in Cusco and they're really cheap. Only the stray dogs. There's lots of stray dogs everywhere, but they never caused me any problems. This happened mostly at the beginning of my mission, and I've heard other missionaries share similar experiences. I was at the beginning of my mission. I knew Spanish pretty well, but didn't have a real firm grasp on it. And there were several times where I'd be teaching a lesson or just talking to a person on the street and walk away from that experience and not really have any idea what I said. Even if I said, I knew I was talking, but I had no idea what words were coming out of my mouth. And that was just a strong testimony to me of it's God's work, and we go and do the work in His place. We just have to go and do it, and He will aid us in any way He can. Well, I had 2 companions that I got from emergency transfers because they had been breaking rules. And it was hard for me to want to work with them because I felt like they shouldn't be there. And it was difficult to really want to love them. But as I, thought about those experiences, it was really me being prideful and not accepting my mission president or the Lord and His atonement. It wasn't my place to judge them or withhold my love from them. They just needed help. They needed to be understood. And if I could go back and change those 2-3 transfers with them, I would. You are going to the best mission ever. The people are awesome. They just love you and want to know you. If you are obedient, and you will have the light of Christ, and they will see it in your eyes. You can be a great help to these people come unto Christ and find hope and healing and love through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and through the atonement of Jesus Christ. You're going to have a great time.
I remember, because I went with one guy from my MTC district, we arrived in Lima, and that was the first culture shock, because Peru is so much different than the United States. I remember getting there, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we went to a hotel in the middle of nowhere, slept for like 3 hours, then got on a plane, went to Cusco the next day. We were completely so tired, so drained. I remember getting to Cusco, and everything, all these dirt roads, there's trash in the street, all these like different, everything's so different. And I remember getting there, and I was like, wow, I'm really gonna be here for 2 years. It was really surprising. It was a little hard to take the beginning, but I mean, everyone gets used to it. And then I remember we went and met our mission president once we got there, and it was really hard to talk to him because he only spoke Spanish. So when he'd interview us, like I didn't understand what he was saying to me, and he didn't understand what I was saying to him. So it was kind of that communication barrier, and so it was a really big culture shock at the beginning. Now it'd be different, I think, with my mission president, because my mission president changed, and so he's North American now. But and it was just such a big culture shock at the beginning, I think, because I didn't no idea what Peru looked like either. So when I got there, it was all different. I had no idea what to expect. And then after that, that same day when we got there, they put us on a bus that night and sent us to our areas. So it was like a lot of big changes really fast. Like within 24 hours, I was in Lima, Cusco, and then to my first area. And so there's a lot of culture shock. It was really fast. I remember they gave us, in that first week, like when we got to our area, they gave us an opportunity to write our families at the beginning. And I remember just writing them. I was kind of distraught, a little worried. And I remember just writing them that first time, and all my worries kind of just went away. They kind of comforted me, and I knew I was going to be all right, and I was where I was supposed to be. And it's kind of just within that first week. The first few days were kind of hard, then I made it to Sunday. And then once it was Sunday, I went to church. And like you just feel the spirit, and then it was kind of all uphill from there. Or not uphill, I mean like better after those first few days. And you get to church, and like you feel the spirit, and I was all right. But I mean, the spirit speaks any language, so I think that helped the most. The main facts in Cusco, in the whole mission, it's over 4 departments, is what they call them. Like Cusco, Puno, Apurimac, and Madre de Dios. And those are like the 4 departments, 4 states, basically. And what's really cool about that is it's so diverse. Like, you have the jungle in one of those departments. It's so hot and humid. And then you have Cusco, which is like really high, just super dry and really high altitude. And then in Puno, it's super cold and it's flat as can be. It's super low. And so there's a lot of diversity within my mission itself, just changing from one area to the next. And within those 4 areas, there's 7 stakes. As of now, at least when I was there, there's 7 stakes, and they're progressing towards an 8th. But when I was there last, they were working really hard on strengthening the stakes and not so much on the districts. And so they're putting a lot of missionaries in the stakes. Other than that, in my mission, like something unique about it, obviously it's Machu Picchu, Lago Titicaca, or Lake Titicaca. So like church attendance in the wards, like the highest there was in the wards is about 200. And it ranges from 200 to about 100 in the wards. And then in the branches, it ranges from like small family groups with 20 people to like 80 or 90 in the branches. So it covers about that whole range. The most is about 200 in a big ward there. Any correlations between Book of Mormon? People would always talk about that in my mission. They'd talk about how, oh yeah, the Book of Mormon, like this happened here or whatnot. Like there was some members in Cusco that were, like everyone in Cusco is really into tourism. That's what they really work in. So there's a few tour guides in our wards or whatnot, and they'd go to Machu Picchu, and they'd always come back and tell us like, oh, we saw this baptismal font in Machu Picchu. Like, we'll show you where it's at. Or they'd show us different stuff. Like, oh, Machu Picchu like has a relation to the Book of Mormon in this sense. So they'd talk about like all the ruins there, because in Cusco there's a ton of Incan ruins like that, not just Machu Picchu. But they'd always find different things like baptismal fonts or stuff like that they would relate to the Book of Mormon. And I don't know how much of it's true, but they'd always connect it to the Book of Mormon like that, just off all the ruins. One of the most common misconceptions is definitely they think that every one of us has multiple wives. So they'd always ask that. But they'd always ask that, and there'd be like, sometimes there'd be articles in the newspaper, be like, Joseph Smith had such and such of many wives, or like there was a lot of stuff like that. I was surprised because you never really see that in the States here, but they talk about that a lot in Peru, is about polygamy. And so we ran into that quite a few times. Other than that, any common misconceptions? Sometimes they'd think it was weird that we would go around as two male missionaries, because they're like, oh yeah, since you guys are, I guess, you don't believe in gay marriage, why do you always walk around as two missionaries? Why do you live together? And they'd always ask us about that too. And with the sisters as well. And it was really weird. They'd always ask us, like, do you guys sleep in the same bed and stuff like this? They'd ask us really weird questions. And so that was the other misconception. Other than that, I think it was pretty normal. The most common challenges is by far marriage, because most people there, they'll live together for, I don't know how many years, a long time. By the time they live together for like 30 years, and they'll decide, all right, might as well get married now. And so it takes a long time for them to get married. Like when you ask them if they want to get married, they're like, well, we've only been together for like 5 years, so that's not enough time to know if we're going to get married or not. And that was one of the really hardest challenges. The other one would probably be drinking. Everyone there loves to drink. It's a really social thing. Even if you don't like get drunk or anything, they'll always go. There'll always be beer somewhere. When you go just visit family or visit friends, they'll always be drinking. Like, it doesn't mean, not a lot, but they'll drink at least some. And that's just so cultural there. Like, if you don't drink, then they're like, they'll make fun of you really a lot. And it's just really hard not to drink and live in that culture. Another thing against the word wisdom they'd use is Coca. I don't know exactly what it is in English, I can't remember. But it's a leaf that they use to make cocaine. And so they just chew that leaf because it gives them energy. It doesn't make them, they don't have to eat, they don't have to drink if they're chewing that leaf, so they can work all day and not have to stop for eating and drinking. And so we would teach that as against the word of wisdom as well, because it's like an addictive substance, like a drug. And so people use that a lot as well. It's the coca leaf, I guess, what they use to make cocaine. I think that's the only other problem they really have. No one there really smokes, so there's no problem with smoking. Never really ran into anyone that smoked. I hardly ever do that. There wasn't really many actual drug addictions that I ran into. It was pretty calm, but they always use that leaf. That's about it. I served in Kurawasi, which is a small town in the department of Puree. That's where I started. A little tiny town, maybe 1,000 people live there. And so there's me, just a few missionaries. And then I served in Cusco, like actual Cusco. And I was in the office for that time, so serving with the president. And that was a really awesome experience. Get to know all of Cusco that way. And then the next area I served in is Chicha, which is another small town outside of Cusco, like an hour and a half outside of Cusco. After that, I went to Andahuaylas, which is about 12 hours away from Cusco. That's about the furthest point you could get, 12 hours by bus. And it's a bigger town, smaller than Cusco, for sure. And then I went to Ayaviri, which is in the Puno region, and another small town of about, 2,000, 3,000 people. And then lastly, I served in Abancay, which is probably the third biggest city, or fourth in my mission. And that was the last place I served, was in Abancay. And so basically out of all my areas, half of them were tiny little pueblos, tiny little towns, and the other half were big cities. And I always ran into that problem in the small towns. There's a lot, like those rumors that we talked about earlier, they'd get really spread about, and it's really hard to get in there and kind of fix those rumors. And so it's really hard to have success in the smaller areas. But in the bigger cities, people were more open to change. And so I saw that in my mission. It was a lot easier to help them convert to the gospel in the bigger cities. Well, like at Machu Picchu, there's one place, because I went with my stake president at that time. He went with us to Machu Picchu and I went. And I remember there's one big open area in Machu Picchu. And you talk from the top, you stand on this ledge up here, and there's this big open area below. And when you talk from this point, it echoes over the whole grassy area. You could hear him at the very edge, easily. And so he would say oh, this is where they had general conference, this is where they gave their talks from. And so stuff like that, where they'd have places to give talks, or I think besides that it was just the baptismal fonts, but they'd have little coincidences like that, yeah. In their culture, it's really common for them, like if you go into their house, like when you get there, you want to greet everyone that's in the room. So basically you're going to go around and shake everyone's hand that's there. Like if you go to, when you go to church as well, everyone that's there in the sacrament or in the cultural hall, you're going to go and greet every single one of them by hand. And that takes a little while to get used to at first, because we never do that here in the States. It's like you go by and you greet every single person, like by hand, look them in the eyes, say good morning or whatever, and then go on to the next person. I think that's something that's really, I admire about their culture, is that they're really friendly. They know everyone. They kind of respect everyone in that way, where they want to like show them that they're glad they're here and like they respect them. And I really admire that of their culture. So make sure you do that. Don't ever just walk into a room and not shake someone's hand, or shake everyone else's hand except one person. That'd be really, really offensive to that one person. Also, like whenever you go into a house, like we do go to teach someone, they'd always offer us food or something to drink, and we'd accept it. Like you need to accept it. They'll usually offer you something, and if you reject it, that's also like really offensive. Like we only reject anything if it was like coffee or something we really couldn't drink. Like we only got that once or twice, and they'd still be like, "Oh, so if you can't drink coffee, you want this?" And we'd be like, "Yeah, that's fine." So if you reject something, like kind of give them an alternative. For like, we said we couldn't drink coffee, so like, do you have herbal tea or whatever we could drink? And so that was something that they're really strict on as well, like offering food. So you never want to reject that. They have like a really heavy respect for their elderly. Like most people there, their grandparents or their actual parents, when they're elderly, like they come to live with them. So like if my parents were elderly and I was old, I had my job and everything, then I'd start taking care of them and they'd like live with me and stuff. And so usually if you run into a family that's older, they'll have their actual parents there living with them and they're taking care of them. And I think I respect that as well. It's like, it shows a sign of respect to the elderly and just pays them back for everything that they've done for us. I really like that. And then culturally, like other things they do, they have a lot of dances. Like they'll have a lot of cultural events where they'll do all kind of typical dances of Peru or of Cusco. And those are really cool. They're very colorful. All their dresses, all their typical clothes they'd wear, they're very cool looking. I like how they look, and they have some really, really awesome dances. They actually have a culture, which is really cool. And they are proud of that culture for the most part, to be Peruvian. The best food by far, their most common dishes, one of them is called lomo saltado, which is like cut up steak with French fries, tomatoes, and onions. And that's by far my favorite dish of Peruvian food. It's just so good. And like when my family went back as well, like that was their favorite dish, was lomo saltado. It's the way they cook it, it just works perfectly. Something else that a lot of missionaries like is ají de gallina, which is like this yellow sauce with chicken, basically, and rice, over rice. But the way they spice it with this pepper, it makes it so good. Like they only have it there. Like it's a yellow pepper they only have that they grow in Peru. So like a lot of missionaries bring that home with them as well. Like I brought some home as well just to make that. Something else, they have papa rellena, which is like what it's called is like a filled potato. That's what they'd call it. They like mash the potatoes first, and they'll fill it up with peas, carrots, ground beef, onions, like whatever you want to put in it, and they'll roll it back up and fry it. And so it's a fried potato with a lot of stuff inside. That's really good as well, papa rellena. Another thing I really liked was salchipapas. Salchipapas is like, it's French fries with cut up hot dogs. It sounds really weird, but it's really good. Like they'll fry them both, and then you just eat it with whatever kind of sauce you like. Like they love that kind of stuff. They just love to fry their food. Another thing that we'd have was pollo broster. It's like, I don't know how you explain it. It's like rotisserie chicken kind of, but a little different. And you'd always buy it with fries as well. They always have fries in some form, or potatoes in some form, I guess. So it'd be that really good juicy chicken with fries. Those are some of their main dishes that you'd see everywhere. You could probably find those in any place in my mission. You could find that, and it's really good. Some of the foods that were really not my favorite is like chuño, which is one of those rotten potatoes that they'll dig up basically. They'll leave it there after it's been dug up for a while until it starts to rot. Then they'll cook it up. And it's rotten. So when you cut into it, it's really, really chewy. So the first time I had it, I had no idea I was going to eat chuño. Like, it just looks like a potato. It's kind of hard to tell. But then when you start eating it, you start cutting it up, you can tell because it's way different consistency. And like, there's another one called Morada. It's just a white potato. But the only difference is they put it in a river and they kind of smash it with their feet a little bit, their bare feet. That's how they prepare it. And it tastes like bare feet. So those are some of their, I don't know, the foods of Puno. But a lot of them make fun of it as well. Like, oh yeah, like, don't you want some chuño or Mariah? Like, they'll make fun of it because most of them don't like it either. Like, there's only a special few that actually like it. Something else personally that I didn't really care for was like in some of the soups that they'd give you, they'd always have like a chicken foot or two in there. And like, mostly people would just start eating that, like, they just pick it out and then they start eating the skin of it and then the little meat that's there. And I never liked the consistency of that. It's just so weird. It's kind of like biting into like really chewy chewing gum. And it doesn't seem like a consistency that you'd want to eat. I didn't really care for that either. One of the best desserts they have is called arroz con leche, which is rice with milk. And so they'd heat that up, and then they'd give you a little bit of mazamorra, which is more Peruvian. It's kind of like a jello consistency, but a little more runny. And that's basically what it is. You combine both of those two together in one plate with this milk with rice. It's really sweet. And then you'd have a different flavored mazamorra, it's like a runny jello kind of grape or peach, pineapple. They had like just a bunch of different flavors, and you'd throw a little bit of those fruit chunks in there, and so that's really good as well. Their most famous one is like purple corn mazamorra. Like, we don't have purple corn here, but they use that there, and it makes a really good drink as well. It's a really good drink though. If you ever drink the purple juice they give you, it's probably made of that purple corn, and it's really, really good. Another good drink they make is horchata. I mean, it's more Mexican than Peruvian, but it's really good there as well. It's super sweet, and it's like a milk with, what would you call it, like kind of brown sugar in it. It's really good too. And Cusco, obviously Cusco is the biggest city in my mission. It's the most heard of. Everyone knows of Cusco. And like, everyone thinks of Machu Picchu when they think of Cusco. And that's also kind of ironic because Machu Picchu is like 4 hours away from Cusco. It still takes a while to get there. But I served there for like 7-8 months. So I was there for quite a while. And I was able to get to know most of Cusco. And it's a pretty big place. I mean, like, the city itself is big. And there's about 500,000 people that live there. It's not a lot of people, but it's a big city. And I remember getting there, and it's a lot different than being out in the outskirts of my mission because it's more industrialized, it's more civilized, I guess you could say. And there's a lot of roads, like most everything's paved, and it's a nice city. I like Cusco. And like, the transportation wise there in Cusco, you could be going in taxis, you can go in buses, you can go in convoys, which are like little, like, big passenger vans where they just cram as much people in there as they can. Like, sometimes they won't even shut the door all the way because there's too many people in there. You'll just be hanging on inside. But their transportation is pretty crazy. I mean, everyone drives like crazy people. I don't know how they do it, but everyone drives crazy there. And so it's kind of nerve-wracking the first few times you're on the roads there because you don't know what's going to happen. It looks like you're going to hit someone or you're going to run into their car. But you get used to it after a while. Other than that, in Cusco, where I lived, it was pretty nice. Like, there's certain nicer areas, and there's little poorer areas. But mostly everyone there lives in like brick houses. And they're pretty normal, I guess. There's not really much difference. I mean, there's no carpet in Peru. So everything's hardwood or tile, I guess. Nothing that nice, but there's no carpet whatsoever. And the housing, it costs, like, we paid about 300 sols per companionship, which is like $100. So it's pretty cheap there. $100 a month is pretty standard for two people. Easily you can find housing for that. You could find it for even cheaper as well. Food wise, it's pretty cheap as well. Like, you can get a good meal for like lunch or dinner for $1 or $2. It's really cheap in dollars. And transportation, it's not too spendy. In a taxi, it's like $1. In bus, it could be 50 cents, 25 cents. They're not the same for little combis. Everything's a lot cheaper there. And then crime-wise, in Cusco, there's hardly any crime. Like, throughout all my mission, like out of Peru, I'd say it's one of the safest areas. Is my whole mission. Like, I don't think we ever ran into anyone that wanted to rob us. No one that threatened to do anything to us. We never ran into anyone like that. I don't think I've heard of any missionaries running into anyone like that. There's hardly any crime, at least towards the missionaries there in Peru. In my part of Peru that I served, there's like no crime whatsoever. So it's a pretty safe mission. You're never really too nervous to walk anywhere. Like, I mean, obviously you want to avoid dark alleyways or whatever, but as long as you're smart, you won't run into anything, because it's not too dangerous like Mexico or anything. There's a ton of dogs everywhere. In every place I served, there's been a lot of dogs. I mean, I never got bit. A lot of missionaries get bit by dogs. I'd say that's the most pressing worry is getting bit by a dog in my mission. For missionaries, there was a few restaurants we'd go to in Cusco. Like, every time missionaries would get together, they'd go to a few restaurants. Like, there was one that was called Fuegos. It was like an American hamburger place, and you'd get just the biggest hamburgers I've ever seen. And that was like the best place to go as missionaries. You go there, it costs a little bit more, but you get this ginormous hamburger. So everyone would go to Fuegos every time you were in Cusco. But then the mall opened, and so everyone would start going to Chili's or Papa John's. And so that's like, it kind of changed. Everyone used to go to Fuegos, but then everyone just goes to get American food now at the mall. People there in Cusco as well, they work a lot in construction. There's a lot of people that work in construction, a lot of people that work in transportation, and people that work in tourism more than anything. Like, they're always building stuff or repairing stuff, and then the other people are off showing the tourists around Cusco. Like, there's a ton of ruins just even in the city itself. Like, you could go see ruins just right up the hill right there next to you. If you just go hike it, you'll find something. Like, that's how frequent the ruins are there, I guess you could say. There's just ruins all over the place. And in Cusco itself, there's a place called Sacrament. It's another big tourist destination, I guess you could say, with these huge rocks that they put together somehow and if you go and try and put like a coin in between the rocks, you can't even fit a coin in between them. They're like so perfectly fit. And I don't know how they could have done that back in the day, but everything is perfectly fit. You can't fit anything between any of these rocks, and they're bigger than any human I've ever seen. And so I don't know how they could have done anything like that, but you see a lot of amazing feats of engineering from the Incans themselves just in Cusco. And like, you have no idea how they could have done any of it. It just doesn't make sense. My third area, it was only like an hour outside of Cusco. So everyone there that lived there, it was a small place as well. Like, everyone would go back to Cusco. They drive to Cusco every day. They'd commute for work. And this little place, I don't even know why it really existed, because everyone would commute to Cusco. If they wanted anything, they'd go back to Cusco. And so I don't know why they'd live out here, but everyone lived out there to just commute every day. And I guess the main reason is because it's probably cheaper to live out there. I mean, housing was a lot cheaper as well than just being outside of Cusco. It's probably like $25 to $30 for two people to live out there for a month. Other than that, it was a really small place. Like, you'd only go there to get to other places. Like, you'd pass through it to get to any other place you're going. It's just right on the outskirts of Cusco. But other than that, it's not too much different than Cusco, my third area, just to the fact that I was a little farther away from Cusco. Internet in general is slow. The fastest was in Cusco. where the bigger cities are, obviously. But sometimes it would take a really long time. Sometimes it was really hard to connect to the internet. At least in the smaller little towns I was in, it was harder to connect. But usually they have internet cafes all over the place. So if one wasn't working, you could usually find another one that was working at least a little bit better. But it usually took a while. And so it'd be kind of hard to read all your emails and kind of respond to them all within an hour, which is what we had. And so we'd usually just start writing people before we even read the emails, and we just print them out later. That was what every missionary did. A good memory from my area, my third area. What you run into most of the time in my mission are a lot of drunks. Like, you'll just see them all over the place. And I remember there was this really funny guy. He was, I don't know when he wasn't drunk. Every time we'd see him, it'd be in the morning, noon, or night. He was always out of it. And every time he'd see us, he'd always be like, "Oh, brothers, how you doing? We gotta talk sometime." And we'd like try and talk to him every once in a while, and he'd be like, "Yeah, it'll be great. We'll talk sometime." And like, he'd always say that, and then he'd just wander off. And like, whenever we tried to actually talk to him about something, it was kind of hard because he wasn't paying attention. But he's always so friendly. Like, you run into friendly drunks and really aggressive ones. So the friendly ones, they'll like try and shake your hand, and they'll talk to you for quite a while. If you don't just like kind of cut them off, they'll just keep talking and talking and talking and talking, and you'll be there for a while. The friendly ones, anyway. And I think that was one of the most random things I ran into in that area. Because then, like, sometimes he'd follow us back to our apartment, and like, he'd bang on our door like, "Brothers, we have to talk right now." And we'd be like, "No, we can't talk right now. We gotta do some other stuff." And he just sometimes, so it's hard sometimes when we ran into him, just because he'd want to talk so much, and then he'd follow us back sometimes, or we just try not to lose him sometimes. They are Quechua people, and what they're called, Quechua. Like, they don't really go by Incan. I don't think anyone really talks about being of Incan descent or anything like that. They usually talk about, because most of them are from Quechua descent, which is like a people, they lived there before. And mostly everyone is of that descent. So like most people that are older speak that language as well, of Quechua. And it's really hard to understand. It's a lot different than Spanish. And it has a whole different structure. So it's like, missionaries will learn a few words, a few phrases, but other than that, it's really hard to understand. And I think that's the only culture they come from. Mostly everyone is Quechua. Like, that's the only thing I heard. In Cusco itself. Like, if you go to Puno, it's Aymara, which is just another culture itself. And they have their own language as well. But with both of these cultures, they're both kind of dying out. Because only the older people, like, they kind of respect their cultures and they embrace it. But everyone that's younger, the younger generations, they don't really want to learn the language, or they don't want to be part of that culture. They kind of want to just leave it. And so a lot of it's dying out in Aymara and Quechua. And so their culture is changing, you could say. Mostly from what I saw would be the difference between the Quechua and the Aymara. Like, I only served once in Puno, which is where Aymara is. And there, the people are a lot colder. I guess you could say a lot more cold-hearted. They're not as kind, warm, or friendly as like the Quechua people. And that's one of the biggest differences I saw. Other than that, they have a lot of different food, like between the Quechua and between Aymara. Like, Aymara has these nasty potatoes, these super rotten potatoes that they just let sit and rot for a while, and they'll cook it up for you and you get to eat it. It's super chewy and really gross. Their food I don't like their food very much, of the Aymara. And it's just a lot different than the Quechua food. They use different meat, if it's like Aymara. Like, they'll use a lot of alpaca and llama. Like, that's what I ate a lot of there. And like, the Quechua use more beef, stuff like that. That's like the biggest change, is the meat as well. Other cultural differences, I think those are the biggest ones that I was able to tell. And also, like, you made me think of another thing. Like, the Incans themselves were in Cusco, and they owned mostly everything in my mission, except for one part where I served in Andahuaylas. There was another culture, you could say. They were called the Chancas, and they were like the most violent culture out of everyone. And so, like, even the Incans, even being so big and powerful, they could never overtake the Chancas, just because they were so small and so violent that they just couldn't beat them. And like, the Chancas would wreck them every time they try and fight. And so I just thought that was interesting, that the Incans, even being so big, couldn't outtake this little tribe that was just so violent, so prideful of being themselves. I thought that was cool. The first area I served in is called Kurawasi, It was probably the smallest little town I served in. And there's only a branch, but this little town was most famous for growing anise, which is like herb there that they use in a lot of herbal teas. And so the whole town kind of smells like that herb. Like it smells really good, which is nice. But that's what it's most known for, because it grows the most of that herb in like all of Peru, I think, even though it's so small. I think that's what it's known for more than anything. Good place to see there. There's La Piedra de Sayhuite. It's like this giant rock, which the Incans like kind of carved a map into it, like of certain things in Peru. Like they have Machu Picchu on there, and they have like lakes and rivers and all this stuff. It's like a map just carved into this giant rock. And like, so if you go there, like a guide will show you, he'll show you what everything means. And it's really cool. I don't know how they carved everything in there, but it's pretty amazing how they did it. And in this area, like we had to walk everywhere because it was so small. There's no taxis, there's no buses. We just had to walk from top to bottom. I mean, because the whole city was like on an incline, so you'd walk one day all the way up to the top and then walk to the bottom. Like it'd take like, I don't know, half hour to walk the whole city. And one of the most interesting memories I have there is that there was a girl in the little branch who was a member, and I remember like she had some problems with her parents, and like they didn't like that she was a member of the church and stuff, and her dad was a drunk, and so he always said that whenever he'd see us in the street, he's gonna try and run us over with his motorcycle. And so every time we heard the motorcycle coming, we were kind of afraid. We'd like look behind us and be like, "Oh no, is it him?" And we'd kind of walk a little bit to the side, but we never saw him. We'd see him every once in a while, but he was never on his motorcycle, and he was usually too drunk to even recognize us. So, but I think that was the most interesting memory I have from that place. It was called Ayaviri, and this is the first time I went to Puno, the Puno area, and so that's where the Aymara people were at. That's where they're a little more cold-hearted. So when I got there, it was a lot different than what I've been used to my whole mission, just because everyone was a little bit rougher around the edges, and so it was a lot harder to talk to people there. Like you could, in other places, you can just talk to people in the street and they'll be pretty friendly. They'll normally talk to you for a little bit at least. But if you try and talk to anyone in the street in Ayaviri or in Puno, it's a lot harder. They'll generally just keep walking or they won't say anything. And the food, like I said before, is a lot different. Like it takes a while to get adjusted. Even from going from area to area, it can throw you off food-wise. Just from the difference. I don't know why. I mean, they changed the meat a little bit, and they have their few special foods they like to cook. They're different from the other regions. We were able to go to visit other towns that were kind of around about it. So we'd go out and visit these other towns too, and try to get people to come to church and stuff. And I remember one time we went to this really, really tiny town out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know where it was even. I mean, my companion went there looking for a reference that we'd received, or a referral. That's what it'd be in English. And we went looking for him, and we finally found him. We talked to him for a little bit. And on our way back, we got confused because we'd never been there before. We didn't know where or how to get back, really. So we kind of started wandering back to where we thought we were supposed to get picked up and head back to our area. And we ended up going in the wrong direction. We walked for like 2 hours the wrong way, and we got so lost. And I remember we had to get help from these other people that drove us back to where we were supposed to be, like 2 hours later. And then we took the wrong bus, and we ended up in another completely random place. And it took another few hours to get back to where we were originally at. So it took almost a whole day. We got lost in this area just because there's so many little towns and so many buses that go different every which way, that we got lost for a few hours, and we basically lost that whole day just because we went to a place in the middle of nowhere and we didn't know how to get back. That was the most interesting, I could say, most interesting experience I had in that area, being lost the whole day. My fourth area, it was called Abejas. It was kind of like a medium-sized city, I'd say. There I saw something for the first time I'd never seen before. Like they have taxis that would drive certain routes every day, and like you'd just hop in if there was room. Like there was room for 4 people, you just hop in and it'd keep going on its route, and then other people would hop in too, like just random people. It was like kind of like a little bus, but they were taxis that just drive around. And that's how we'd usually get around there, is like in these colectivos. They just do the same route. Like you wouldn't tell them where you want to go. You just had to make sure you're going somewhere on their route. And you just get off whenever it's done. That was the only place I'd seen that in my mission. I think the only thing that's different about it is it's just so far away. It's the furthest point away from in my mission. It's like 12 hours away from Cusco. And that's about as far away as you can get from Cusco. 12 hours on a bus. So it's a really long ways to get there. It takes a long time, and it's a rough travel to get there. It's probably the worst. Like most people get sick on the way up there. They usually vomit on the way up because all the roads are so windy. It's just so hard to get there. But other than that, it's kind of like Cusco in the sense of the people. People are about the same as people in Cusco. They're nice and friendly. I think it was pretty easy to help people come to the church there as well. Like, not too hard, actually. In my 6th area, I'd say it was the perfect one to be my last one because it was all inclined. Like, I mean, straight up. Everywhere you're going, it was like that. It was so steep. So, like, my first few days, I was so tired just from walking up and down this hill all day. And it helped me get in shape for coming home. But other than that, it was really hard. The people in this area were really, really helpful. Like, it was probably the most helpful area I was in. It was called Abancay. Like, I think the people were, I don't know, they were more gung-ho about doing the work. Like, we had more members that would come out and help us than any other area I had. And I thought we had a lot of support of the ward, which was really nice. I think that's a general rule for Abancay. Like, most of the wards are really helpful to any of their missionaries. In this area, like, we had some trouble with the housing. I remember we were without light, or without any power or water for like a week. That was really hard. I mean, we didn't have any place to shower or any place to, like, at night it'd be so dark and you just go home and you didn't have anywhere to plan. You have to go to bed. I think that was the only area that I ever had ran into that problem, where there was no light at night in this house, at least for a week, just because the power went out in that area. And so that was the only real problem I had there. I've heard of that happening to a few missionaries in other places as well, but it's more rare than the norm, I would say. In my mission in the jungle, there was more sickness than anywhere else. Like, every missionary that went to the jungle, like, it was almost 100% sure he was going to get sick with something. All the weird diseases were in the jungle because they had all these bugs and stuff that if you got bit, you didn't know what kind of disease it had. Sometimes missionaries in the jungle got dengue. But other than that, all of the other parts of my mission, it was just like common cold or like a flu. Those were like the only sicknesses you'd get. But in the jungle, I remember there was a really weird one too. Like, this missionary got bit by a mosquito, and this mosquito like lays its eggs in your leg or something wherever it bites you. And so it just keeps growing bigger and bigger until it like kind of explodes, and then like you have this giant hole in your leg if you don't take care of it. So wherever you get bit, like, you have to make sure you get it taken care of right away. Otherwise, you'll have this gaping hole in your body that won't go away once it's gone. So that was pretty weird. I saw that his leg was so gross looking, but then they got to it like right in time, so they were able to take care of it. But it looked really, really bad. At one point, it was all black, like this giant black center, and like it was kind of having black veins going through his calf. Like, it's just kind of spreading. It was really gross, but they got taken care of, thankfully. Something helpful to bring, for sure, you need to bring something for the rain. It will rain a lot in Peru, and at least in my mission. That's for something for sure you need. Other than that, I know when I went, it said to bring a blanket. You definitely don't need a blanket. I don't know why it said to bring that or a comforter. So that just took up a lot of space in my bags. Make sure you bring a flashlight. Just for some random cases when you go without light, sometimes at night, you'll need that flashlight. You don't need many long sleeve shirts, mostly short sleeve shirts. I only had one suit, and I used it only on Sunday. Get good walking shoes because you'll walk a lot. It was extreme weather. It was probably big thunderstorms. In Cusco, it rains a ton. And sometimes it'll just be thundering like the thunder will fall right next to you, like in the house right next to you. That happened once or twice. It's really loud. It happened once or twice. Like it never struck right really near me, but pretty close. The bus ride to Andahuaylas. It's probably the most crazy, dangerous thing I've been on. I don't know why, but it's because the roads are so small. Like I'm saying, you're in this tiny little bus, and there's these big giant trucks on this side, and there's the giant cliff on this side. And I remember trying to pass by these trucks, and we're like, there's no space in between us. And we're just driving by, and there's this cliff on this side, and we were pretty terrified. Or at least I was terrified. I didn't want to fall off the edge, but it's like this truck was going to push us off. Well, at least we made it. But it happened a few times on the way there. Like sometimes they'll fall off, or the buses would fall off. It happened. So it was a pretty rational fear. A random skill I get in my mission would probably be throwing this little top. Like they have this little top they have that the children play with, and like they just throw it and it just starts going. It's like this big wooden top. It's really hard to throw. I think that's a random skill I earned on my mission. Like we'd play on that. We'd use that on Pide sometimes because it looks interesting. Like the little kids play with it, but we never had it, so we'd always play them. We'd be the only adults playing this game. It was just fun. I remember there was one elder. He knocked on a door, and he was talking to this person, and he was pretty new, and he's like, "So we're here to share this plan with you, and this plan ends." Like he kind of just said, where we can go to live. Like you're supposed to say where we can go to live with Heavenly Father in Christ after this life, and he's like, where we can go to die, like where Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father go to die. Like instead of saying where we could live with them, he's like, that's where they die and we live. And it was pretty bad. The greatest life lesson I learned was to always keep our Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ close, just through everything daily that we do. Like all the daily habits we gain in the mission, like reading scriptures every day and saying our prayers every morning and night, and just the basic things that will really keep us closer to them so they can give us the Holy Ghost and guide us on every day like we need it. Learning the language for me, it took me a little while, it took me a little longer, and it was really, really hard at the beginning. I was really frustrated with myself because I'd never really had a trial that I couldn't really overcome that fast, that really put me on my back like that. And so it took me a while to really humble myself and kind of put my confidence in the Lord and just wait and be patient. And with time, I was able to overcome it. But it was really hard in that moment to not be able to speak to anyone, to express your feelings, everything you feel like by the Spirit, everything you feel prompted to say. It's really frustrating. And for the first months or so, I think that was my hardest trial. One of the most spiritual experiences I had on my mission was being able to teach this awesome family. And I remember it was the husband, the mom, and their little girl. I remember we were able to teach them, and like right off the bat, the Spirit was super strong in that room. And you could just tell they were ready, they were prepared. And you just talk to them. And we told them to pray about the Book of Mormon and do what they're supposed to. And then like the next lesson or two, they both had their answer. And it was like super strong, and we could feel it, they could feel it. And it was like every lesson we had with them was just super spiritual. Like I never had investigators that every lesson was just that spiritual as it was with these investigators. It was just like that every time I went to their house. I think another spiritual experience I had was we were teaching this young man. He was like 17 years old. And the first lesson we taught him was the Restoration. And we didn't talk about the Book of Mormon at all. We just talked about Joseph Smith, and we kind of ended it there. And the next lesson we went to, it was only the second lesson. Like he came out from his room, and like the first thing he told us was, "Elders, I know the Book of Mormon is true." And he's like, "It says so right here in the Bible." And like he kind of pulls out this verse, and he's like, "It says something there." And it's like, all right, that's perfect. You can show us all day. We know it's true as well. And it was kind of weird because we never talked about the Book of Mormon until that point. And so like it just showed us his initiative to go look for it, and he got his answer. It just made it super spiritual. You could just feel it. If you just got called to Cusco, you're going to go to the best mission in the world, that's for sure. And this mission, you'll run to people that are super kind, super friendly, super warm. and they'll become some of your best friends that you will have. And these people as well, you'll be able to teach them the gospel, and a lot of them will accept the gospel. But don't be disheartened when a lot of these warm, kind people as well reject the gospel. It happens, and it's just part of the mission. But I know that all the work that you'll do in Cusco will eventually bring a temple there. That's one of our big goals in that mission with our mission president, was to make it so eventually, a few years down the road, there'll be a temple in Cusco. And that was our goal. That's what we'd always share with everyone, with all the members. So basically, just keep working towards that goal. Work hard every day. Get up, do everything you're supposed to, and you'll have success in Cusco. There's plenty of people there that are ready to receive the gospel. And there's plenty of people there that you can talk to. Make sure you teach every family you can, and make sure that if you see a family in the street, that you talk to them. That's what our mission president always told us, was that if we saw a family in the street, a complete family, we should talk to them, and you'll see miracles from that. And I know that the church is true, and I know that after your experience in Cusco, you will have a stronger testimony, and you'll be ready to face any challenge that comes for the rest of your life. I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.